Hi there, podcast fans. I'm Tom Gibbs. Welcome to Telegraph Audio Football Club. Today, reaction to a 2-0 Chelsea win in which Padawan learner Frank Lampard tactically outclasses Jedi Master Jose Mourinho and in the process reawakens the Tottenham manager's dark side. 'Tis the season to appoint new managers with surnames beginning with an A will run the raw over Arteta, Ancelotti and a dreadful game between the two sides they need to fix. Plus, Liverpool are champions of the world, but does anyone care? Leicester lose some of their sparkle. Manchester United have a Hertfordshire nightmare before Christmas. And we ask our panel, who are you putting at the top of your tree? Let's take you now into the audio recording facility where I'm joined by Mina Rizuki. How are you, Mina?
I'm like the world's most tired human being at the moment.
Come on, mate, it's Christmas.
I know. And you know what it is? I was telling our producer, Joel, that maybe I'm just so well rested because I'm not doing that much that I just can't sleep at night. So I have amnesia and now I'm not getting any sleep.
So
not amnesia. What's the other word? Insomnia.
Insomnia, yeah. Clearly you're not firing on all cylinders. Like, big run after this or something, surely. Like, go and do something to
run. Are you mad? I need to nap.
Okay. We'll work it out. JJ Bull, how are you? Well rested?
Yes. Well, yes, I am.
Good.
I think it's important to be well rested, or at least pretend.
I agree. It feels a little bit like a weird job interview where you're trying to say something to please me.
No.
No. Okay, good.
Yes.
What a great natural start to today's
What do you want me to say, Tom?
I don't know, mate. I don't know. We're just trying to have a bit of levity at the beginning. It's a small but perfectly formed group today. We were going to be joined by Sam Dean, but he's had to head off to Arsenal to talk to Mikel Arteta, but we'll have him on the phone a little bit later. Let's start instead with Super Sunday, as it's written here on the script. Sun spelled S-O-N. Once again, unfortunately, we've got to talk about racial abuse for Rudiger, this time at Tottenham. You'd have thought in this case, Mina, it would be fairly easy to identify the culprit behind this, given the number of cameras at Tottenham. It's obviously the newest ground in the league. So you'd hope this will be dealt with quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is something that we're seeing. It's almost like making a return now all the time. I don't know what's really going on. Obviously, this is a huge issue in Italy that we're trying to target, evidently with poor artwork. But when it comes to England, the best thing is for players to call it out, for the protocol to be put out there and executed. It's annoying because whenever you speak about this subject, people always go, it's 2019, as in, and we're going to go into the next decade, and as if somehow the date is going to change everything. And I'm guilty of it too. And we are supposed to be further along. But a lot of the times I feel like on social issues, we're regressing in general in society, and it's being reflected in our football. But yes, this is something that needs to be targeted. There needs to be cameras looking at who the people are, and they should never be allowed back into the stadium. But I do agree that it should be something that we target as a nation globally, because if you target this in society, you try to deal with the root of the problem, then it won't be reflected in our sport.
Yeah, very well said. Let's reluctantly start the VAR timer, please, Joel Grove. Sonny is presumably desperate to have Christmas Day off. Such was his weird kick on the floor into the chest of the Chelsea defender. And then there was this mad Gazaniga death assault.
God, I love that.
For the penalty.
I loved it.
Both correct decisions?
Yeah, Son seems to think he can get away with these sorts of things because he's like everyone's
got a
mate.
record, hasn't he?
Yeah, he does it all the time. His little petulant things. I get it because I think I'm quite nice when I play football as well, like Sonny seems to be. But then again, you leave a little bit in. And
Oh,
you're
I
like, what
so
am I
do
doing?
what he'd do.
And Son's done that a few times before, but he's not got away with it now because of VAR. And he's like, oh, I can't believe this. But then the penalty is hilarious. Like on the old, I think it was FIFA 99, me and some people on Twitter worked out that there was a button you could push to do a deliberate foul. But like that's a proper flying through the air kick. No need. You could easily have caught it. Fantastic.
It was good
I
VAR,
loved it.
Oh.
right? We had a good VAR game. Those were two things that went the other way in the initial decision. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Do we also have a 1 minute timer if we're talking nicely about VAR?
What about Tottenham in this game? They were all over the shop.
Yes. It's funny. So Mourinho's been talking a lot about how he's had no time to work in the training ground to do anything with his players. So the ideas he wants to put across, he's not had time. This is the first week he's had to work with them, but because of the upcoming fixtures and the busy schedule before, he gave them 2 days off at the start of the week to, I guess, rest, which is important, make sure the players are on side with you and things like that. But then he turned up at the game and Lampard changed his system to match Spurs, got it dead right. there's a couple of things with it. I don't think it was a masterclass that Lampard put on. He's effectively doing what Antonio Conte used to do. It's the same team. Even Alonso was back in the side, so it's basically exactly the same thing. Kante and Kovacic in the middle of the pitch is a lot like what Conte had before when he was there. Rather than Jorginho was a bit of a liability in a 2. You can't really have him doing that job. And the way it worked was that because Spurs line up with Kane as a 9, Dele behind him as a 10, effectively a second striker. Chelsea had 3 centre backs, so that's 3 versus 2, so you can outnumber them. But because when Chelsea played out from the back, they had a 3, so Spurs' front 3 couldn't really get to them, and they always had a spare man wide to move the ball so they could progress up the lines really quickly. But when Spurs had the ball and they move into a back 3 because Vertonghen tucks in and Aurier pushes up, it meant that Alonso could then block Aurier, so he's not available for an option. I mean, whoever was on the other side was blocked by the other wing back, so they couldn't get forward. And you saw that rather than have Mount and Willian wide trying to press the other centre backs, they stayed just in between them both, so there was no real forward option. So Spurs were stuck in their own half. Distribution was poor, but that's because Chelsea blocked it really well, and they weren't able to get out of their own half. I thought Chelsea were just decent.
I love that you refer to it as like the Antonio Conte way, because I was surprised that no one else had said that. And I was like, that's what's really funny is that Willian, who
Mourinho did after the game. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't listen to that.
Well, it's this is the thing. I know the mask is going to slip, and I think it started already. But he goes, rather than being like, I think the suggestion was that Lampard had performed some sort of tactical miracle. Like, Lampard's a decent coach, and what he's done is clever.
Yeah.
But it's the basic response to what he knew Mourinho would do. And I thought Mourinho might be a bit smarter actually with it. But
he did
Lampard,
make changes to adjust.
Well, he did, yeah. But Lampard could play that system well because Chelsea's players are completely like au fait with it. Like, they know the system, which is what Mourinho said. Like, he'd played a system that Conte had them familiar with, so it worked. Whereas Mourinho can't switch his because his players are only really good in a couple of them, which aren't very different.
It's funny that Willian, who disliked Conte the most, was the best player in Conte's system.
He was brilliant yesterday. I really love Willian. What a wonderful finish for the first
But
goal.
you know what? I
Penalty
really do
brilliantly as
feel
well.
like, as much as he's been amazing for a long time now, I feel like he's really grown. A lot of the times what used to bother me was that he was almost too fast for the team. And so he always had to sort of check his passing. It was either, it was almost like exactly. No one could keep up with him except for, I would say, Hazard at the time. But now he's the perfect guy to add to the team. His touching, his passing, the way that he controls the ball, he really was. And Mason Mount was fantastic on another level as well. That desire to make the clever runs, to push forward, to find the spaces, really, it was a very good job.
Yeah, very impressive from Spurs. We should also have a word from Jeremy Wilson now on the death of Martin Peters over the weekend.
Desperately sad news this weekend with the passing of Martin Peters. He's the 5th member of England's 1966 World Cup winning team to have died, the 2nd in 2019 following the death earlier in the year of Gordon Banks. Peters, of course, scored the 2nd goal in the 1966 World Cup final, a match that ultimately became synonymous with Sir Geoff Hurst, his friend and teammate at West Ham. But I think what's often forgotten is that just how close Peters came to becoming the main headline himself. He scored England's 2nd goal. It was within seconds of being the match-winning goal. Only an equaliser in the 89th minute forced the game into extra time and obviously allowed for Hurst to score his 2 goals. But I think what's really come across over the weekend is just what a great player Peters was. A goal-scoring midfielder. Sir Alf Ramsey said he was 10 years ahead of his time. There's been a lot of comparisons in the last 48 hours with Dele Alli and Frank Lampard. Lampard feels like the best comparison when you look at the statistics, but also the trophies that he won, both with West Ham and Tottenham. He was a winner and a real legend in English football. Martin Peters was 76 when he died. He'd been living with dementia for around 7 years, and it was in 2016 that his family announced publicly that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It's a disease that we now know is impacting former footballers at rates significantly above the general population. Of Peters' 1966 teammates, Nobby Stiles is currently living with dementia, and Ray Wilson died of the disease last year. Jack Charlton is suffering significant memory loss, and the manager of the 66 team, Sir Alf Ramsey, also had dementia before his death. Research published in October by the University of Glasgow found that former professional footballers are 5 times more likely to die of Alzheimer's disease. So Peter's death has really highlighted what has long been an often unseen dementia crisis among a large number of former professional players. The FA did actually announce on Friday that they would look into introducing limits on heading in training in an effort to minimise head impacts. And while there is also much that could be done to mitigate risks with much stronger concussion protocols, I really hope that football, with all its wealth, will also now really step up and address the issue of supporting families in terms of the care that is needed for those players who are living with brain disease.
Second part of Super Sunday was, of course, Watford with another fantastic performance. Another game that went against the grain slightly. We weren't sure about Nigel Pearson, Mina, but is this a sign of things to come for them?
Yeah, I think so. I think that obviously he had, with Manchester United arriving late to the party, Nigel Pearson had even more time to spend with his players, takes on a super hands-on approach, created a side that was well organised at the back, very aggressive in midfield, and to be quite honest, lucky going forward in the sense that, De Gea had a shocking day, and of course, like the defending leading up to it wasn't exactly great. You could see in the mobility of his players and the desire, their energy, they were all happy to team up and sacrifice for one another, join up and try to stop the opposition. They were disciplined positionally and the intensity showed. And I think that obviously Manchester United once again came into this game sort of, expected to do something, and we all, as we consistently talk about, when they are asked to keep possession and show something special, sometimes they look too slow and just unbothered, really. I mean, Paul Pogba came in and changed the match, but all in all, they don't know how to really build attacks unless it is that long ball, which Pogba also provided at the end, or unless they're counter-attacking. I think there's a problem otherwise.
It was odd with De Gea because there was that clangor before the goal-causing clangor where he was fouled at a corner, apparently. I wasn't completely convinced that was a foul at the corner, but you would have thought once you've done that, that would prevent you from doing something so brain-farty later on in the same game.
It's difficult to tell what De Gea is thinking, but he's not been the great De Gea that he's meant to be for the last couple of seasons, I think. He's not been very good for Spain, really, ever. He's made a lot of mistakes there. I mean, he's made 2 errors leading to goals this season. Man United have made 5 this season. Your stats there, but if he's one of their best players and he's making errors, it's not. You can sort of see where United are.
Do you think it's a psychological thing?
Probably.
Like he's just fed up.
Got to be for that second one.
It's a bit of confidence, a bit of confidence. You feel bigger and stronger if you're confident, and then you can hold on to those sorts of things. He just reads it a bit wrong, and you can tell he knows what he's done as soon as it goes in. It happens, but like we always say, the goalkeeper, they make one error and that's the goal. I think there's a weird thing with this game. So like you're touching on, Mina, so notice this a few weeks ago in some analysis that did of Manchester United, that when they have the majority possession, they tend to lose or draw. And the more possession they have, the worse the result tends to be. Like they lose 2-1 to Palace, 1-0 to Newcastle with about 70% of possession. But they do beat teams like City and Leicester and Chelsea when they are given less of the ball because the players they have are set up to counter-attack. But Solskjaer has clearly worked on things, well, his coaching staff have during the week and in recent weeks to try to stop this from happening. And that is by getting the ball quickly through the lines to break down this midfield block that people put up. So Watford versus a 4-5-1, which is basically a line of 2 lines of you basically have 2 lines of midfielders in front of the defence. So McTominay and Fred aren't great at distributing the ball. You look at their pass maps, everything is sideways or backwards. Fred's getting a bit better at progressing play. McTominay goes sideways always. So Lindelof and Maguire were the ones who were basically the playmakers, firing the ball through lines into the forwards. And United were getting chances out of this, and Lingard especially makes really good third-man runs in behind, and that's where he got his chance, which he put over the bar. If he'd scored that, United would instantly be able to sit back in the counter, and that's where they're best at, and I think they would have strolled to a 2 or 3-0 win against Watford. But the players aren't taking the chances. Solskjaer's planning is correct. Like the way he set them up is the right way to do it, and there's things they're doing that make a difference. When Pogba comes on, I totally agree, change the game, because he could hit those balls that split defence straight away, but also his positioning. He was taking up space between the lines later on in the game, which is forcing Watford back. So as soon as he was on, United had even more of the ball, but squeezed the pitch because Watford would push back because Pogba was in position, and then they were able to do these little there's little patterns of play they've got where one player fires the ball forward, one guy touches it off with his first touch to another who plays it forward, and then there's an overlap run from the side. And you can see they do it quite a lot. It's definitely done on the training ground, and it works, but there's just not finishing chances.
Yeah, but is this... You see, my issue with this is that even when Paul Pogba came on, and obviously he did change the game because he is one of those players that, firstly, his passing range is ridiculously beautiful. But it sort of does seem a little bit like what they tried to... They do have a weak midfield. That was something that everyone spoke about even in the summer. It kind of just looks like, like let's just deliver balls that go over the midfield and straight to the forwards. That's because this is what it is. And even when Pogba came on, he had like a 1-2. He did push up, but the other times it was these long passes over.
Hopefully some happier times coming soon for Manchester United, but very well done for Watford. Good performance for them.
Hi, I'm Claire Newell. When I tell people I'm the Telegraph's investigations editor, they sometimes ask me if it means I'm a spy and have lots of disguises. And there is a bit of blending into the background, but generally I spend lots of time working with sources, piecing together evidence to reveal wrongdoing and hold the powerful to account. Our stories question, scrutinise and inform. But we can't do that without the support of our subscribers. Their contribution allows us to dedicate time to stories, such as our investigation into the allegations that Sir Philip Green had sexually and racially harassed staff. So if you'd like to support what we're doing and get unlimited access to the huge range of quality journalism on politics, sport, business, culture and more, head to telegraph.co.uk/audio, where you can get 30 days free access to the Telegraph online. And after that, it's just £2 a week. That's telegraph.co.uk/audio, or click on the link in the show notes to this episode.
The boy wonder, Sam Dean, joins us in his car on his way to see Mikel Arteta. Sam, Arteta watched his team against Everton on Saturday. What do you think he would have made of Arsenal's performance, and what's going to be at the top of his in-tray?
I think they actually looked more solid than usual against Everton, which is a sign of progress to some extent, but also they had absolutely nothing going forward. The team selection was bordering on hilarious from Freddie Ljungberg, who basically decided that I've got one game left and I'm going to go down swinging, and binned off all the senior players, including Mesut Ozil, who had a foot injury. But Ljungberg said, Mesut couldn't play because he's got a foot problem. But even if he was fit, I wouldn't have picked him, which I really enjoyed. Gloriously needless sort of beef there. But clearly, for the last 3 weeks, Ljungberg's been trying very hard to get the senior players to buy into what he's trying to do, and they clearly haven't done that based on his unhappiness with them and the fact that he's basically bombed them all out in favour of the kids who he's worked with for a couple of years and really likes. But as for Arteta, I think the main issue is the midfield and sorting that out. I think Ljungberg's made a bit of progress there in terms of solidity and making them have an actual shape, which they lacked under Unai Emery when it was just completely chaotic. I think if you fix that, then that should protect the defence more, and it should free up the attackers a bit more too. But there are so many issues in that team: lack of confidence, lack of goal scorers beyond Aubameyang. It'd be interesting to see where he starts and how long it takes for Arteta to impose the sort of style of play, which we can only assume will be similar to what Pep Guardiola does at City. So
set our expectations for us, Sam, because it feels like on one hand you could argue Arteta is a very highly regarded coach. Everyone who's been close to him and seen him work at City is very impressed with him. The other argument, of course, is that he's never managed a football match in his life. Yeah. What are you expecting from him?
Well, I'm not expecting anything drastic immediately. He said last week on his unveiling press conference, he said in the sort of to the newspaper reporters afterwards upstairs in the director's box, he said you can't build a process like similar to a Guardiola-esque process right now because they haven't got the time, they haven't got a pre-season. There's 2 or 3 games a week for the next 2 months pretty much for Arsenal. So he's going to have to, in his words, he needs to find an immediate short-term impact first and then build the process after that, which I took to mean don't expect Guardiola sort of esque tiki-taka anytime soon, which I think is interesting in its own right. I don't expect him to sort of completely revolutionise the team in terms of their style of play, but I do expect him to get them playing with a bit more cohesive pressing, more intensity, a bit more organised, a bit more disciplined, And he said himself, I'm going to be quite ruthless. If players aren't buying into what I want to do, and they're not going to play. So you can only assume that the likes of Ozil, Lacazette maybe, even Granit Xhaka, maybe even Aubameyang, are going to have to sort of fix up, look sharp, or they're going to be in trouble.
Bring some Dizzy Rascal energy to Arsenal.
Yeah.
What about off the pitch, Sam? It was interesting, I thought, on Saturday you could hear in the stands there were some chants from the Arsenal fans about Arsenal fan TV and them not being entirely happy with them. And then there were some arguments after the game as well, which were on social media. How disillusioned and divided are the fan base at the moment?
Yeah, it's pretty grim. The Arsenal fan TV debate is almost a whole separate issue on its own. We could do that for a good 2 hours, but fans turning on each other is never great. Fans turning on their own team is never great, and we've seen both of that quite a lot this season already. Obviously, the Granit Xhaka booing and subsequent stripping of the captaincy was the most obvious example of that disillusionment sort of seeping onto the pitch and affecting the players. The fan TV thing is interesting because obviously the main accusation against Arsenal fan TV is that they create a climate of negativity which causes sort of extremist views to flourish. Yet I would argue that shouting "get out of our club, get out of our club" is also creating negativity and only fueling that further. So I'm not quite sure what the answer is here, but you can only see this one rumbling on, unless of course Arteta has an immediate impact. They beat Bournemouth 3-0 on Boxing Day, and suddenly everyone's happy again. It's a new era, and all the people who get angry have changed their Twitter pictures to black and white ones of Arteta looking moody and saying, at Arteta ball 1004. All that kind of thing, and everyone's happy again until the next crisis.
Oh, a wonderful vision of the future, Sam. Thank you very much. Drive safely.
Thanks, Tom. Sorry for the noise.
Never apologise. Should we ever talk about Carlo Ancelotti? Everton, understandably, their fans are pretty excited about appointing such a high-profile manager with such a brilliant track record, but it is an odd one. Does he have much of a record in sorting out bang-average teams, which is what Everton are?
The only team that you can sort of compare it to would be, he was at Reggiana for not for too long, but even at Parma he inherited a team that had, for example, Gigi Buffon, Lilian Thuram, Enrico Chiesa, Hernan Crespo, all the rest. It's that dream team you get in Championship Manager. He's his style of management is meant to be quiet and calm. He likes to get responses and opinions from his staff and players, likes to involve everyone and then to make the right decision. He's also been talked of as a real tactical mastermind. He's introduced a lot. I mean, I was talking to Mina about this for a piece I wrote, and you were telling me he was made up the Christmas tree and moved Pirlo back to deep line playmaker.
Playmaker, yeah. He also wrote a book about the Christmas tree. He
in football, not just the trees.
Sorry, I said in the Christmas tree of football formations. I think that he's evolved because he was a guy that was quite wedded to a certain philosophy at the time. He spoke about not finding a place for the likes of Roberto Baggio in his formation, and so it was like, oh, I've got to give him up because this is the kind of team that I want to play. And then obviously with time he realised that being pragmatic meant that you have to adapt to the players that you had. And then what he was really good at, I mean, I know that he's always had spectacular players. I mean, honestly, at Milan, even at Parma, Bayern, Real Madrid, it's always been just a collection of exquisite footballers who can all think on their feet. And despite that, though, I do want to say that he manages to create this cohesive unit. And for me, nothing was more beautiful than Real Madrid in his last season. He went on an 18-match run at the time, a winning run, and he did so without any defensive presence in midfield, with effectively what was just a bunch of number 10s.
Do you think he'll work at Everton, though?
I think it will be okay, but he won't be able to get much more out of the group of players that he already has, and that is Everton's big problem. They're kind of stuck where they are because the players they have, like we said so many times before, are of a level below that of teams above them. The benefit he's got is that he'll get time because of his name, which is important, and he'll get transfer windows to change things. But if 18 months' time, which is what Everton managers seem to get, he hasn't improved. So the win ratio of every single Everton manager since David Moyes is about 42%, 41%. No one's get higher. Roberto Martinez is the highest with 42.8, I think, something like that. Ronald Koeman came after him. Sam Allardyce was lower than them all, managed to keep them above relegation. He likes playing a 4-4-2. He's done that a lot of times to good success. He did it really recently with Napoli to get a draw out of Liverpool, and he beat them as well using that formation. He's got Duncan Ferguson, who'll provide the fire behind the scenes, but Ancelotti likes to be calm, so I'm not sure how that quite works. Like, you're balancing out the cool with the hot, which is another thing that doesn't really make sense. But the big problem, I think, for Ancelotti, regardless of how good a tactician or motivator he is the players are all right. And that's
I actually don't know if he is. It's strange because I'm actually not sure if he is this great motivator. He famously in Bayern lost the players because they were having all these intense high training sessions behind his back because it was and then he came out saying, I don't kill my players in training. My issue is that he's always played, or rather presided over, a team that had players that were on another level of professional. So I'm talking about taking on Clarence Seedorf and Andrea Pirlo and Gattuso, and then or having Ronaldo or having Sergio Ramos. You don't really need to go to these guys and be you really need to give it your all against Alaves. You kind of just know that Ronaldo's going to want to score 10 because this is the time. At Napoli, he didn't have those players. And he found a team that was sometimes depressed, that felt like the president wasn't grateful to what they've given. And I don't know at Everton whether he's going to need to be a little bit more of you need to be a little more authoritative. I'm not sure if he has the players that can sort of not need him as much. And so he doesn't need to be the good guy that takes away the pressure. He needs to add the pressure, in my opinion. A bit like Chris Wilder, my favourite man.
Well, I would say that would be actually a perfect kind of manager for Everton, was someone who can make... I think they need to build something that takes them to a certain place and then appoint someone who can take them up to the next level, rather than just constantly throwing money at the same average team.
There's the solution for 18 months from now. Let's stay on Merseyside and very quickly move to Qatar and talk about Liverpool, who have won the Club World Cup. 2 1-0 wins. The first one a very, very late goal in normal time. The second one in extra time. Is anyone else beginning to get real Sir Alex Ferguson peak Manchester United vibes from this Liverpool team? They just seem to inevitably win games now.
I think they're brilliant. I absolutely love watching them. And they've been so bad to watch for many years. It's really average, those kind of games where they should win but end up losing 1-0. I think Klopp's got them playing just great football. And Roberto Firmino might be their best player, if not the best in the league just now, but you notice him more when he's not there. It's really weird. When he comes on, they came on against Monterrey and instantly Liverpool were miles better. He scored the winner in that game and he also scored the winner in the actual final. Every time he comes off the bench, he's done it 4 times this season. He's either provided an assist or a goal. He links everything together. But like I said, when he's not on the pitch, you notice, because Liverpool they're not the same. They can't break down teams.
Yeah, for the way that they play their football, he's absolutely essential because he just brings it all together. He's like the glue that brings them all in.
But doesn't get those glamour stats. He doesn't get goals or assists that many.
He's that guy. He's like Benzema. No one cares, right? As in the guy can do everything in the world, and everyone will be like, yeah, but is he really Aguero? And you're like, oh my God, he's amazing.
What about this tournament, Nina? There's a sense it's not that big a deal in this country, but is it held in high regard elsewhere around the world?
A lot of Europeans, don't hold it. And I think that you always tend to be a little bit snobby about things that you know that you're going to win because you're just better. It's a huge deal in South America. For them, they'll Corinthians at the time took 22,000 fans to play Chelsea in 2012. Whereas Chelsea, I think, had 1,000 fans over there. There's a huge difference for them. This is something that they go and watch. They think that they have a chance of doing something special. I don't know whether the new format in 2021 will bring in more people and more interest. Real Madrid certainly took it seriously. They did want to win these games. I think teams in general, and I thought Liverpool wanted to win it because it's the first time and it's the trophy they didn't have.
I think it's great. I love it. I've always thought it's an awesome competition, but I think, like everything, especially in Britain, I don't know what the rest of Europe's like, but the snobbiness about it comes from not knowing much about it. It's a bit of ignorance. People don't know who Monterrey are, they've heard of these teams like Corinthians or Flamengo, but they don't actually know who plays for them, who they are, so they can't judge how good they are. Therefore, it must be some foreign nonsense. And Liverpool walk them over.
Do you kind of feel like it's like the bad, ugly sister of even the Europa League? Because I feel like no one cares about the Europa League.
No, I mean...
I care deeply.
Yeah, I like the Europa League. I think because it's the World Club Cup thing, and you only qualify for it by getting to the Champions League, it should be held in higher regard, and it would be. There would more money into it, probably. But I really think it's got to do a lot with people not knowing much about it and who the teams are that they're playing against.
More money required in football. That's JJ.
Yes.
Let's have a rattle through the rest of the Premier League now. There was a terrific game at Airline Stadium North where Jamie Vardy scored a fantastic goal, continuing his brilliant run, but then Manchester City just overwhelmed Leicester in the end. Was this a reality check for Brendan Rodgers' team, JJ?
Not so much a reality check as that Leicester can see where they are.
That sounds like a reality check.
Well, I don't
that's
think,
exactly the definition of a reality check.
but I don't think they thought for a minute they'd realistically be that they're better than City or that they'd really push them the whole of the season. I mean, City, I'd imagine, would catch them up and get above them to second, and we'll push Liverpool for the end of it. Leicester have a great team and will get there, but it just takes time for that winning mentality to cultivate inside it. They've got almost everything, a bit of a small squad, but City haven't been great lately, so it's good to see that they've turned up again.
I felt like it wasn't Leicester though. Like, I couldn't say to you this was all like, typical Leicester and this was typical City having a game. I just felt like sort of Leicester didn't show up.
I just thought City were just fantastic in this game.
Yeah.
I thought it was a real sort of show of dominance, and as JJ says,
when you have Kevin De Bruyne.
Yeah,
and Rodgers adjusted as well. Like, he changed the way his team set up so they would just put the ball over the top for Vardy, which is it makes sense. It's a sensible tactical choice.
Yeah, I guess so. But then they didn't win any of the balls in the first half. They were just they weren't as strong in possession. I didn't feel like I feel like they got very intimidated in the first half.
Maybe, but then I think what Tom's saying, that City were so good with the ball, and on another day, so they played another 3 times that game. The ball might drop a different way a couple of times, and they break and they.
But you still think it'll be a City win?
Not necessarily. I think Leicester will beat them. City are the better team, and they should have won that game.
They are the better team.
But yeah.
Two teams Mina Rizuki is deeply in love with played on the South Coast. How impressive were Sheffield United in seeing off Brighton, Mina?
Okay, I'm not that in love with Brighton.
You're in love with Graham Potter.
But I do like Graham Potter, yeah. I don't know what it is that I love so much about Sheffield United. Is it the fact that they know how to defend? Is it the fact that they have this beautiful line of 5 and then 3 in midfield? And you know what it is? Unlike teams like Arsenal, for example, who sometimes when you have players that run at you, they just keep dropping back and back. They actually do proactive defending. So they are not only are they perfectly disciplined and organised at the back, but they try to win back possession. They try to tackle you. They win their aerial duels. They're just so good. And then going forward, I mean, I would really like it if McGoldrick was a little bit more efficient. But the how much these two work, how annoying they are for the opposing centre-backs. They're just a side that don't have sort of... You looked at Brighton, and I do love the way that they play their football as well, and I do think Potter's amazing, but they do make a lot of mistakes. And Matthew Ryan isn't exactly the world's... he was really happy to get VAR to sort of, give him the reprieve on the 2 mistakes that he made, but... Sheffield United, for me, are just such a well-balanced team that are so good going forward, that are so good defending. That kind of balance is the reason why they are where they are, and teams like Villa are fighting.
Yeah, one of the stories of the season, Sheffield United. It'd be interesting to see what Brighton do, perhaps with a bit of money at some point, and Potter there. You would have thought for the long term, there's definitely... You would expect some improvements to be had there. What about Villa, JJ? Big win for Southampton, who seem to be much better away than at home, but... Looks like the wheels are coming off a little bit now for Aston Villa. There was the talk at the beginning of the season that people were reminded of Fulham in the previous season when they bought a whole new team, and it is looking a bit more like that way for Villa now. And now they've lost John McGinn as well for several months, which is terrible news.
Yeah, I don't know if the wheels come off, or they were just never really properly on.
I agree with that.
Yeah, Villa are fine. I don't think at any point I've thought they were really great. I think Grealish has good moments. McGinn is massive, but teams have sort of figured out if you can outnumber McGinn and Grealish in the middle of the park, they're really weak in other places. Mings is a good defender, but one man doesn't make a defence. The goalkeeper's fine. The goalkeeper Wesley, this forward Wesley's been all right as well. But they just lack a few players that are as good as others, and teams around them of a similar level. Like, I'd even put maybe Newcastle in a similar sort of quality of player that they have. Are just playing a super defensive, relying on one chance from a counter-attack kind of game. But Villa want to play the Aston Villa way, the Dean Smith way, and it doesn't work if the players aren't good enough.
Can I just say one thing that you said that they're so good at home, and it's always being spoken about with Southampton, being better away than at home.
Yes.
Can I just read the games? It's Liverpool United, Manchester United, Bournemouth, Chelsea, Leicester and Everton that they played at home.
Right.
That's a hard bunch of teams. And the ones that they won away, I mean, yes, it is Brighton and Sheffield United that we've just spoken about, but they both suffered a red card in those games. So they were playing against 10 men effectively. Then it's Norwich and what, like, I just feel like that's why it looks like they're just so much better away. And I just wanted to clarify that.
A fair defence. What about Newcastle United, Mina? Unbeaten in their last 8 at home in the Premier League. St James's Park, not as many people there as there used to be, but becoming a real fortress. Get Steve Bruce a statue outside, right?
I know, I love him. It's funny, I mean, obviously Benitez was great, but he was a tactician. The aura at the club was, a little bit anxious, and people were at the time, well, still are, angry at the ownership. But what you have with Steve Bruce is that not necessarily defense first and then we'll see what happens and try to get a goal. It's a little bit like, let's tailor make these, tactics depending on who the opponent is. He obviously had more money to spend as well. But it just looks like the environment, the way that Almiron, celebrated, it just seems to be a very happy environment. And that kind of thing breeds success, it breeds confidence, and everyone there just looks to be really having a good time. Benitez, a lot of the time, isn't the kind of guy that you want to sort of, you want to rush to training to see. This is where Ancelotti is that kind of guy. And I do think, like with Steve Bruce, I want to play for him because it just looks like it's a great time over there.
I'm sure he could use you, a busy Christmas period coming up. Absolutely brutal game at Dean Court between Bournemouth and Burnley. 5 shots across both teams, and I saw Duncan Alexander tweeting that Riyad Mahrez had double that himself for Manchester City on Saturday. I wonder if you saw the XG for this one, JJ, and I wonder if you think we should dock Burnley and Bournemouth points for fouling up our sport.
Yes, Michael Kelly graphics. He's got a good XG model, and he has it at 0.2 versus 0.2.
That is bad.
That's basically nothing.
5 games.
God.
Five games of that you'd had to watch to see
Although,
2 goals.
In fairness, Everton versus Arsenal was 0.5 and 0.7, so it's not a huge amount better. But yeah, the good thing with Bournemouth is that they keep beating good teams and then losing to teams like Burnley. So it's important that they get at least a draw out of this because they're wasting the points gained by beating teams like Chelsea, stuff like that. So at least there's a positive to that, I guess, in one regard, showing a bit more solidity defensively. Perhaps. Just seem convinced.
Perhaps. Play that funky music, Joel Grove. It's time for A Song for Europe. So, Mina, 17 games now into Serie A, and Inter and Juve are level at the top on points. Juve played in a very strange game at the weekend, which I'm sure you can explain to us. But this is an exciting title race shaping up in Italy.
Yeah, finally, we actually have a proper title race, and one that possibly Juventus may lose. Only because Antonio Conte is back in the picture, as we know, at Inter, and because what they do have is a wonderful forward line and a strong defence that sometimes tends to fall asleep. But Juventus are just not looking that great under Sarri. They were defeated in the Supercoppa. The Supercoppa is your equivalent of, what was it you called?
The Community Shield.
The Community Shield, that's the one. Where the winners of the Coppa Italia take the winners of the league on. So it was
played in December, obviously. In
December, in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, because, that's where the money is. And second season, I believe, that it's been played in Saudi Arabia. And Juventus were dire. Lazio was stunning. They are in stunning form at the moment. Won 8 in a row. Inzaghi's doing a terrific job. But as for Inter, it was against Genoa. They've had a hard week. They dropped out of the Champions League, only Italian team to do so. So it's good times for them. Genoa, of course, are about to probably sack their second coach now. So really hard times for that team. What
about in Spain? How is that title race shaping up?
It's an interesting one because there's a lot of players who've come out. Zinedine Zidane, one of the main reasons why he left Real Madrid was because he couldn't win the league, basically. And despite the fact that he was just dominating the Champions League, he was getting really angry that he didn't have a team that he could mold and make them consistent. Now they've all come out and said, this is the league, this is our priority. Sadly, they got another draw against Athletic Bilbao. That's following the draws against Valencia and Barcelona. They are a really stunning team to watch. And in the Clásico against the very best in Barcelona, Madrid were the better team. But what you do have in Barcelona is Messi, who can make the difference in matches. And right now they are 3 points ahead and leading them. And it's up to them to see whether or not they can be consistent enough to push off the challenge from Madrid.
And over in Germany, it's energy drink Leipzig leading the Bundesliga. I wonder, Mina, are they a widely liked team in Germany, these new pretenders to winning the league?
According to a survey that was taken, I think it was about a year ago or two, they are the second most hated team after Bayern Munich. But obviously everyone always hates winners, right? Leipzig are hated because essentially what they are is a team that plays football in order to sell a product and a lifestyle. When, everyone else is out there, for the integrity of football, because it's a sport, because the fans own it and have a vote in it. Whereas at one point they only had 17 voting members in their 50+1 rule. So they are supposed to be everything that one dislikes in the new world of football, which is money and consumerism and just, making commercial activity the most important thing in the world and not necessarily focusing on what Dortmund do or other teams do, which is building from grassroots and creating a side that makes people happy with fans that have a right to vote. But they are doing tremendously well under Julian Nagelsmann. We've heard so much about this man who's a disciple of Pep Guardiola in many ways. But he has a very fun and dynamic team at the moment. They've got Timo Werner, who scored 18 league goals, just one behind Lewandowski on 19. And just a squad with a lot of talent in it, English talent, French talent. Whether or not they can keep their position, my money's still on Bayern and Hansi Flick.
Right, let's finish off the show with some Christmas levity and a question we put to our friends on social media. I saw a couple of GIFs in response to this, but unfortunately GIFs will not be tolerated. This is an audio product. You need to use your words. Here's the question. Which person from the world of football would you put at the top of your Christmas tree, JJ Bull?
I would put Leo Messi. He's the boy. Or...
And he's only little, so it might work, yeah.
Kasper Schmeichel, when he goes to dive, he jumps out like a star sometimes.
Oh, nice.
And that would fit nicely.
Lovely answer.
Yeah.
Mina?
You know what? You should have sort of Ronaldo just doing a header, and that's how he reaches the top.
Oh, okay.
But I kind of like it to be Roy Keane, just because but with horrible words being spoken every time you walk past the.
I mean,
the
Roy
tree.
Keane does often act like he's had a Christmas tree put up him.
That's why I just like it. It's kind of like, you could just shout abuse, a bit like a Grinch, at the top of your Christmas tree.
He hides underneath it and pops his head out.
Very Christmassy.
Yeah, I like it.
That's your lot for this week. You can contact me on Twitter if you want to. You can wish me a happy Christmas if you want to. Why not? @Tom with an H Gibbs is where you need to go on there. Don't forget to send us an email as well. It's afcpodcast@telegraph.co.uk. We will, of course, read out the best of what you send us. Subscribe to Audio Football Club. You know you want to. Just look for Audio Football Club wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Joel Grove on the buttons. Thanks to you for your company. Have a lovely Christmas. I'll talk to you again soon.